Uh, Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Cyber Resilience Act AI project webinar. My name is Mihai Rotariu. I'm the Communications, Marketing and Media Department Manager from the Romanian National Cybersecurity Directorate, which is actually your host today for this event. Before we start, just a few logistical details. Please have your microphone muted and your camera off during the presentations, as for the audience to have a clear understanding of what is being presented, and also surely to avoid other sounds overlapping with ours. Hence, we invite you kindly to ask your questions in the chat. My colleagues will select those questions and we will address them at the end of the session in the Q&A part. Also, make sure that you select the right viewing option to see the presentation. You can check this on the menu above in Teams. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you, our audience, and to the cybersecurity community interested in the Cyber Resilience Act. So please make sure you follow our channels, especially on LinkedIn. We will provide you with the necessary links to in the end. Now, let's start the presentation, and please the next slide. Surely now regulation usually comes with some degree of challenge for the entities who are aimed by the regulation. There is a high degree of uncertainty. There are a lot of questions. How could this impact my business? What costs are we talking about? Will we be able to navigate through this efficiently? We surely understand this perspective. On the other hand, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, so we need to cooperate inside the whole cybersecurity ecosystem, which includes not only providers of services, but also users. And we must build trust together in accessing digital services securely to enhance trust also in the European digital market. So building trust can be done by education, but we also have to make sure that the digital products that are on the market have a proper security standard built in by design, because technology is moving fast at a pace, and unfortunately, cybercriminals make use of this technology better than us, the common user, and faster than us. So we really need security by design in the software we use to achieve decent protection for all types of users. So we are excited to welcome SMEs from all across Europe during today's session, and we are surely glad for such an interest in our work. The goal is straightforward, I guess. We want to help you understand how the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA, may affect your business and what can you do about it. We know new legislation can feel complex, especially when you're managing products, customers, day-to-day operation. That is why this webinar is built to be practical, to be clear, and a useful start of understanding how can your company receive help in this process of achieving compliance with regulation. So we've designed today's webinar around three key objectives. First, to help you determine whether your company and your products fall within the scope of the CRA. Second, to show you the tools and the resources available to help you assess where you stand. These are not theoretical, they're built specifically for SMEs and tested with real users. And finally, surely to introduce the broader support program so you know exactly where to go next, who to talk to as you begin or continue your compliance journey. Next slide, please. So why should you care about Cyber Resilience Act? Well, I think we all can agree that cyber criminals usually target SMEs because there is a general belief that they can invest less than others in security. And they also think that the impact on the business continuity is much greater than the bigger companies. So they can be blackmailed, let's say, much more easily. Okay, the regulation is coming and it's comprehensive. If your business makes or sells digital products, especially in the EU, there's a good chance it affects you second. The stakes are high. Non-compliance can result in fines, can result in loss of market access. But more than that, there's also the reputational risks, and there are also operational disruption. So the CRA is not only a legal box to check. It's about building trust with your customers and ensuring your products are secure from the ground up. Next slide, please. Now, let me briefly introduce the project behind the webinar. This is an Europe-wide collaboration bringing together cybersecurity experts, public agencies, and SMEs themselves to simplify CRA compliance. So the goal is to remove as much of the complexity, the uncertainty, and cost as possible, and to replace it with practical AI-supported tools that guide SMEs to the process. From assessing risk to understanding how to prepare for conformity assessment, we want to make sure that the CRA compliance is within reach, not just for large companies, but small and medium-sized enterprises too. Now, our cross-European collaboration, let's say, is coordinated by our colleagues from the Cybersecurity Labs. The next slide, please. Next one. Thank you. Our coordinators are Cybersecurity Labs, and they lead the project and developed the AI-powered CRA compliance platform. Our colleagues from Cybersecurity Labs are with us in this call, and you can hear from them later. There is also Refracted Security, which is enhancing vulnerability management tools and providing secure code analysis and penetration testing integration. We have Zippo, which is designing CRA-specific training modules and integrating learning components into the core platform. We have NRD Cybersecurity serving as a pilot SME with 2 in-scope products to validate the platform through real use. We have surely the National Cybersecurity Directorate in Romania, which will be leading dissemination activities during the project, including webinars and stakeholder engagement. And last but not least, Readiness Labs, which will be supporting the pilot phase and defining the technical artifacts needed for successful CRA conformity assessments. Now, thank you for being patient with my introductory slides. And now I would like to give the floor to Patricia and Connor, our coordinators from the Cybersecurity Labs, who will provide you with more information on how we can help you guys further with the CRA. Thank you and see you back in the Q&A session.
Thank you, Mihai, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Patricia. I'm the CEO of Cybersecurity Labs. As Mihai said, we're the coordinator for the project. And really today, the theme of the webinar is Am I in Scope? But I'm just going to do a very quick overview of the CRA first, for those of you that might be unfamiliar with it. So the Cyber Resilience Act is basically a regulation to ensure cybersecurity of products with digital elements. And today we'll go into more detail about what that is. The CRA applies to digital products made available on the market and whose intended purpose or foreseeable use includes direct or indirect logical or physical data connections to a device or network, including the internet. The products themselves must be designed, developed and maintained with security in mind from the very beginning. So security by design, security by default principles are very important here, and this has to be done during the design phase of the products. Manufacturers also will have ongoing vulnerability management, reporting, and disclosure obligations, even when their product is on the market. So these requirements are actually throughout the entire product life cycle. So it's an iterative approach. The CRA, basically the EU want to protect consumers, and they want to protect the digital supply chain with this regulation. And essentially, they want to see less products released on the market with vulnerabilities in them and that are not secured by default. So essentially what they're saying is we need to push the risk and the responsibility back on the manufacturers and take it away from the consumer. Affixing the CE mark is part of the regulation. So now manufacturers will be asked to affix the CE mark for cybersecurity. And this is a responsibility, a legal responsibility. So manufacturers are going to have to attest that their products are cyber secure and that they're released without any known vulnerabilities. The 3-year transition period, so the regulation came into effect in December 2024. Now we're in nearly June, so actually there's only 2.5 years left. It will come into effect essentially in December 2027. There are other requirements coming in earlier, and they're the vulnerability reporting requirements. So there will be a single reporting tool available for manufacturers to report their actively exploitable vulnerabilities and any severe cybersecurity incidents. And these can be reported to the National CSIRT and also ENISA. These requirements will come into effect in September 2026. We will probably have another webinar going into a lot more detail on vulnerability reporting and handling. Harmonized standards. So the Commission have asked for the standardization community to come up with harmonized standards that will cover the essential requirements in Annex 1 of the regulation. So essentially to help break down those requirements and provide guidance for companies in scope to follow standards. If you follow those standards and if you comply with those standards, you get a presumption of conformity to the regulation. The standards are being worked on at the moment. However, they may come quite late in the day, and there is a fallback clause there that if the standards aren't ready, that common specifications will apply. So Connor, who is our CTO, is actually on the standardization committee for the harmonized standards. So we will be able to provide updates on that through our LinkedIn and through our webinars and so on, and keep you informed of what's happening there with the progression of the standards. Enforcement will be, because there are penalties for not complying, and each member state will appoint a market surveillance authority. A market surveillance authorities will be responsible for ensuring that the manufacturers and distributors and importers comply with the CRA, and they will be able to have the power to do things like market sweeps. They will cooperate, the different market surveillance authorities cooperate with each other and make sure that the CRA is implemented and enforced appropriately. Next slide, please. So the CRA has different product categories. There's 4 product categories. The product categories are really designed around risk and risk level. So we have critical products, which are products like smart meter gateways, which are very important in, say, the energy sector, and obviously have very critical risks attached to them. And these types of products will need to undergo a rigorous assessment, conformance assessment, probably under EUCC, which is the EU Common Criteria. Class 1 and Class 2 products also have higher risk than, say, the default category. And you'll see there that class 1 and class 2 products, like some of those products will need a third-party assessment, and some of those products can follow a harmonized standard and get a presumption of conformity with the CRA. You'll see some examples there of the products in those categories. You know, the Annex 3, for anybody who's interested in looking more in depth, will show the exact products in those categories, Annex 3 and 3A for class 2. But obviously a lot of those products, as you can see, some of them are quite cybersecurity focused and network focused, microprocessors, microcontrollers, so that type of thing. Most of the products will fall into the default category. And I guess that's where a lot of the questions arise about, am I in scope or am I not in scope? For the default category, they would be deemed as the less risky products. But the Commission will have the ability to move products around these categories in the future. So they may start to deem some products more risky and move them up categories, or move products from category to category in the future. So the default category, really, I suppose what you have to do there is to follow the definitions given in the CRA text to know if your product is actually in scope. And in the next slide, we have a little activity, which is to fill in a scope assessment. So anybody on the call, we're going to put the link in the chat, and you can fill in a short questionnaire and find out if your product is in scope. You'll answer some of the questions there and get a report. So initially, when you get to the web page, you put in your email address. You'll be emailed a validation code. You just copy and paste that validation code into the validation field, and you can log in and start doing the questionnaire. I'm going to give you maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to do that. At the end of it, you will get a report on screen that will tell you whether you're in scope or out of scope, but it will also give you some rationale behind why and how you answer the questions, and why from the answers to the questions we deem whether you're in scope or out of scope. Obviously, some products are a lot more complicated, or some scenarios are a lot more complicated than others. So as a disclaimer, always speak to somebody as well as doing any assessments like this, because there are quite a few exceptions, but also there's some more complicated cases that might need a little bit more digging into. So I'll give everybody 2 minutes to fill that in. Okay, I hope everybody had time to fill it in. If we go to the next slide, we're going to go through some of the questions that Sorry, somebody could mute their mic there. Thank you. So some of the questions in that questionnaire are up on screen here. So this is kind of the scope explained. So who is in scope? So economic operators, manufacturers, importers, and distributors. So if you're one of them, you get a tick in the box. Now, I suppose one of the things that is a little bit confusing is that when you say the word manufacturer, people, presume it's somebody making something physical, and actually it's a lot broader than that. So, so even if you're a company and you're providing a service, and maybe you have a phone app that goes with that service, and it's given to your customers for free, but it's in the course of a commercial activity, that phone app will be in scope. Software is in scope as well. So it's important to remember that manufacturer, it covers a lot of scenarios. So the definitions you would have got in the response there in the questionnaire will actually define what a manufacturer is, what an importer is, and what a distributor is. I think importer is pretty straightforward. It's somebody who's importing products with digital elements or components from abroad, and a distributor is essentially a reseller of products with digital elements. And all of these entities are in scope. The importers and the distributors have slightly different obligations to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer has the highest responsibilities. The other question is, your products being made available on the EU single market. So that means even if you're a company outside of the EU, once you're making your product available inside the EU, you're in scope for that. And made available is a term that, because I think originally the terminology was selling your product, but it doesn't have to be that you're selling your product. You're just making it available or placing it on the EU market. The products themselves, so products with digital elements, means hardware and software and their remote data processing solutions. And what we mean by remote data processing is that if you have a device or a product that needs some sort of remote data, maybe it's an app, a phone app, maybe it is a portal, and you need that for the product to function, that essentially is in scope as well. So your product also is connected. It's a connected product with a direct or indirect logical or physical data connection to a device or network. And most products today are connected to something, whether they're wireless or they're Bluetooth or they're physical connections. Most things are connected. There's very few products that aren't. And I suppose the last two are, you'll see there, the CRA with the line through it. So this would put you out of scope. So your product is a standalone software as a service. And what we mean by standalone is that it essentially doesn't interact with any other sort of device or hardware. So think of things like Dropbox, Microsoft 365. So they're kind of standalone software as a service products. They're not in scope. They will probably come under the cloud services regulation. And finally, your products covered under other legislations. So medical devices, aviation safety, military and national defence are some of the other regulations that a product could fall under, and therefore the CRA won't apply. However, in saying that, there are going to be medical software devices, and so aviation, you would think it's mostly in the safety area, but if you have in-flight entertainment software, for instance, that will be in scope. And medical devices, so some of the wearables that are hooked up to say a health app, a Fitbit type app, they they will be in scope. So you really need to understand what those regulations are and if they apply to you. Most manufacturers will know, if they're a medical device company, what's in scope and what's in of those regulations. So that's a little bit about the explanation behind the survey that you just did. And I'm going to hand over to Connor for the next part.
Thank you, Patricia. So maybe let's take everything Patricia has said and let's look at an example. So the example we have is a home security system. I just think we lost the presentation. I'll just pause for a moment. Yes, we're back. Thank you. So if we take something we probably are all familiar with, a home security system, which is made up of lots of different products. So looking at the example we have on the screen, on the left-hand side, we have some IoT devices. So these could be sensors, so sensors to detect motion, for example. We also maybe have indoor cameras for recording inside the home, and then outdoor cameras for recording outside the home. So each one of these could be products in their own right, in that they could be placed on the market and sold as standalone kind of products, or they can be sold together as a bundle, in which case then the scope of the assessment would cover all of the devices that are part of the product per se. So it's just trying to get an idea of the definition of product. And then also there's an ecosystem. So you may also extend that system to have key fobs, so smart locks to lock and unlock doors with some kind of a physical token. You may have a phone app, which you can see alerts on the phone app, or you could be streaming from the cameras, or you could remotely allow somebody into the home or open a door through the smart lock. And in these cases, sometimes there's remote data processing happening. So sometimes those cameras are streaming to a remote service that then streams that down to the phone app. So one of the things in the CRA around scope is that remote data processing is in scope. And there's some definitions, which in further webinars we'll get into, as to how to distinguish remote data processing from, as Patricia said, things like software as a service or other things that are covered by other regulation. And then in the product, there may be actions that come out of the product which need to be considered as well. So as we said, the phone alert may be triggered when motion is detected at certain times, particularly say at night or when you're away from the home. It may alert authorities or it may contact a monitoring centre. So all of these things come into the scope of the CRA. So when we get into further webinars, we'll look at things like the risk assessment that needs to be conducted next to the scope, which takes into account the intended use of the product and the environment in which the product will be operated. So these are other things to consider. So I think the point here is that individual standalone products may be part of a product ecosystem, which needs to be considered when we're thinking about the security that needs to be within the product. So, for example, cameras that are streaming live video should potentially encrypt that video stream as it transits across, let's say, a public network. So if you've got home Wi-Fi and your indoor camera is streaming that video feed through your broadband connection, that is appropriately secured so that people can't intercept that video feed and sort of intrude on the confidentiality of that system, but also taking into account if the system is supposed to alert authorities, that the alerting system cannot be suppressed. So if I'm looking to subvert the system so that I can not be detected entering the house when people are away, maybe one of the ways I can do that is to suppress the alert to the authorities by hacking the system, or indeed being able to replicate key fobs and, for example, enter the home by pretending to be somebody that I'm not. So these are all examples of the product ecosystem, and that as Patricia was saying, and the scope covers all of these potential features and elements. So maybe if we can move to the next slide. And I think I will need to share my screen in a moment. So we're going to go and take a look now that you've done the in-scope assessment, which hopefully is a very short assessment, a small number of questions that helps you determine whether the product is in scope or out of scope based on the criteria that Patricia had on the previous slide. We're now going to step through the next step in this preparatory process, which is a readiness assessment. So after the webinar, you can contact the DNSC for a coupon code. The email address is on the screen. We'll also send a follow-up communications. What that will give you is a coupon code, which you can then use in the process to obtain the assessment, and it will give you the assessment for free. Also, we'll take a look when you do that, you'll also get our navigating the CRA guide, which is kind of a step-by-step guide that breaks down each stage of what you need to do in order to comply and conform with the CRA. So I will share my screen and we'll step through this together just so you can see what it's like. So I will start sharing my screen now. Thank you. Now. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, maybe we'll just take a quick look at that guide that I spoke about. So the brochure will appear on your screen in the top left-hand corner here. You just click on it to download the brochure. So it's got this as its table of contents. I'll just zoom in a tiny bit. So an overview of the CRA, then what to consider when you're planning either a new product to bring to market, or the CRA also for existing products that undergo a substantial modification, the CRA will apply. So if you're planning a big upgrade to an existing product post the CRA coming into effect in full in 2027, you will have some planning work to do. Then what to do in the product design stage. So when we looked at that scope, the product design stage will be figuring out for each one of those components within the product suite, what are the security controls that need to be in that product. So as I mentioned, a big part of that is the risk assessment, which will be the subject of a future webinar. Then as you're actively developing the product, what to do. Bigger, yeah, okay, like so. I don't actually get to see. Yeah, is it too small, is it? I can try share again if I'm sharing the whole screen.
We can see only the brochure. If you're sharing anything else, we don't see it.
It's okay now? Yep. Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can see it a bit better now. The product development stage, what to do when you're actively developing the product. So that's a lot of testing and validation that the security controls work. What to do when you then release the product onto the market. So there's documentation obligations. So what to put into the documentation to describe what security is in the product. And then the maintenance stage. So one of the things about the CRA is that there's a responsibility to continue to provide fixes for vulnerabilities or to disclose newly discovered vulnerabilities for the lifetime of the product on the market. So we'll get into those future stages. Okay, so back to the readiness assessment here. So I have my in-scope report here. So I think everybody will have filled this in, but we're just going to have a look. So there's an overview here, but then it tells me the results. So it's saying that I'm in scope and it's telling me why. So my product is a digital product. It's connected. It's not SaaS, as Patricia said. It's not covered by existing regulations. So once we know we're in scope, then we can choose to begin the assessment. So I have one that I've already partially filled in. You can see it's a home security system, so it's similar to what we looked at. Click continue. We get the 4 stages of the assessment on the left-hand side: general information, risk assessment, vulnerabilities, and documentation. So you can see I filled in just the general information. So that's a sort of information about us as a company and our products. So fill that in. That's quite straightforward. Then, as Patricia pointed out, choose which category. Obviously, you've got not sure here, but choose which category you're in. Are you hardware or software? How are you placing the product on the market? What's your product development life cycle? That's important because that determines sort of the amount of time that you need prior to the CRA coming into effect if your product is to be placed onto the market after the CRA comes into effect. So we fill that all in. Where do we sell the product? Click continue. And then we have questions related to the risk assessment. So you can see they're all pretty straightforward. Some are multi-choice, some are sort of the Likert scale, whether you strongly disagree or strongly agree. Then we move on to the second part, which is about testing within the risk assessment. So again, you can answer the questions here. And then the last step in stage 2 is around secure configuration. And then we move into the security control section. So you can see there's 10 questions there. Then we move on to stage 3, which is all around vulnerability management and how we manage vulnerabilities, both in the development lifecycle and then also when the product has been placed on the market. So in terms of disclosure, so one of the things the CRA requires is to have a disclosure policy in place, a coordinated disclosure policy in place. So do we have one? Do we not? We continue on. And then we get into the documentation section. So there's requirements in the CRA around software bill of materials if you have software as part of your product. And then what's in the product documentation. So do you describe to users what security is in the product and how to operate it? Then you get to the last stage. So you can see roughly that time it takes to fill in the questionnaire is 20 minutes to half an hour. You can leave the questionnaire. So you've seen that I left the questionnaire and I had come back, so you don't have to answer it all in one go. You can answer some questions. If you need to find information from other people, you can go find that information, you can return, and all of your work will be saved. And then when we click continue, we get to really what you want, which is the report. So we can see the report gives a kind of an overview here, tells you what the report aim is, and then it gives me a nice results overview. So you can see I'm doing okay in these sections here, but actually in terms of vulnerabilities and documentation, I have a good amount of work to do. It gives me an overall score. And then it breaks down each section, so I can kind of drill into each section and see where I'm scoring. So in this example, I don't have a vulnerability disclosure capability, which is why I'm scoring lower there. And I don't do any of the documentation requirements for the CRA, which is why I'm scoring lowly there. Then in each section, it will give you some good advice as to how to close those gaps. So what are the activities that you need to do in order to address those issues? So it gives me information about risk management, about testing, about secure configuration, security controls. And in the vulnerability here, it's basically telling me, yeah, you need to kind of go and do all of these things here. So it gives me a paragraph on each one of them, and then the documentation. And then it gives just some very high level recommended action. So you can see from about 20 minutes to half an hour, it gives you a really good snapshot of where you're at today with respect to the CRA. The good news is it doesn't come into full effect till 2027 with the vulnerability requirements in 26. So there's time to take action and follow some of the actions that are outlined in this guide. And I will stop there. And I think hand back to sharing to yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we will share the presentation again just to continue with our. I think you have to close the share screen. Ah, okay. Okay. Can you see it, Connor?
I can indeed, yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
Mihai. Okay. So just, sorry, if we just go back one slide. Yep. So as part of the project, we are developing also a software solution to help companies do all of the things that we just looked at in the readiness assessment. So this will be an AI-powered software platform that's going to support you in each one of those sections. So for example, it will help you write the user documentation. For example, if you don't have the required user documentation process in place, you can use the software. We're looking for early adopters. So anybody on the call who would like to be an early adopter, we plan to have what we would call a minimum viable product, sort of a demo product, ready towards the end of August into early September. And we're actively looking for early adopters to help us test the software, to help us make it as good as it can be. And in return, you'll get early access to the software for free. And also help to educate yourself on what you need to do for the CRA. So anybody who wishes to be an early adopter, if you can also contact the DNSC on the address that we gave, asking to be an early adopter, or follow the link that's in the slide here to register. So you can go straight to our site /CRA-AI. Either way will work, and we'll sign you up as an early adopter. Okay, maybe we go to the next slide, and hand back to you, Mihai, for Q&A.
Yeah. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Connor. Surely this was really helpful information. Now, surely we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions about the CRA, about how it applies to your business, about anything maybe you've seen today, this is your chance to ask. The chat is open. Also, if you would like to address your questions and give you access to the microphone, please raise your hand from the menu above. And you surely might be wondering about maybe specific CRA clauses that are unclear or difficult to interpret, maybe challenges in applying security by design in your product development, steps towards conformity assessment for SMEs, and last but not least, the use of tools presented today, surely, and how to access support. So we are really waiting for your questions. Raise your hand or ask your questions into the chat, please. I have a question that it arrived on private actually to me, so I will. Okay. My colleague Mihaela already inserted the question into the chat. Will there be tools from the project that SMEs can use for free?
Yes, Mihai. So there's the Am I in Scope tool. And also there is the sign up as an early adopter.
Okay.
And that program really is for us to learn from SMEs who are in scope for the CRA so that we build a product that actually addresses their user goals and needs. And there will be other materials, so, articles and information about standards. So just to keep everybody up to date. We'll also have other webinars that will delve a lot deeper into areas like risk assessment, vulnerability management, and particularly security by design and by default. So and conformity assessment. So our other partners on the project have deep expertise in some of these areas, and they will be joining future webinars, and essentially it is a bit of free training attending those webinars. Obviously the readiness assessment is there and ready to go as well. It's a really good first steps for SMEs just to get a gauge on where they stand today against the requirements. If you're an SME on the call and you're in scope, you can send that email to the DNSC email address and get a coupon to log in. We really are just supplying it to SMEs in scope because one of the deliverables of the project is to actually do a market scan and understand SME maturity and needs, which the DNSC are going to be doing, and that report actually we will be sharing that with the community as well.
Yeah, and also do not forget that we have a LinkedIn channel that you can access and be updated with all the information regarding the project, including when the next webinars would be on. So keep an eye on our channel. Next question: are there any guides planned for small businesses? Any other guides?
So I guess, Mihai, there is the guide that anybody who applies for the coupon, they'll get that guide. And yes, we do have plans for other guides as we travel through the project, dealing with specific kind of more technical topics such as vulnerability management and disclosure, guide around that, and the risk assessment, which I think is a really foundational piece. So there will be other guides coming, which we'll host in the platform.
Yeah.
So yeah, is the answer.
That's great. Here's a difficult question, or maybe much more philosophical one. Given the complexity and cost of compliance, is there a risk that the CRA could unintentionally stifle innovation among SMEs? And if so, how does the regulation mitigate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually the regulation has a good few clauses in it, particularly aimed at not stifling innovation or putting too much burden on SMEs. I mean, the main aim of the regulation is to improve security in products, not to put any burden on undue burden on anybody. And there are clauses in there related to some of the penalties, for instance. So some of the penalties won't apply to SMEs, like some of the penalties around timing of reporting vulnerabilities. If they're missed and it's a small to medium-sized enterprise, you know, it will be looked at in terms of, well, they're a small company. We're not going to, you know, penalise them to the extent we would a much larger organisation. So they will take that into account. There actually are a lot of clauses around supports. So there's a lot of other projects, European funded projects, and we're actually working with some of these projects and clustering with them. There's one around open source and tools to help you know, people who are using open source within their products and understanding the compliance of those. And there is actually a funding available for SMEs. So there's a project that we will actually also provide information around that funding. I think it's 30,000, 50-50. So the SME puts in 15,000 and the European Commission give you 15,000 to be able to comply. And then there's going to be lots of portals that direct you to tools, and free tools, and also tools that will be very cost effective. So one of the requirements of us getting the funding was that when we bring the tool to market, it will make it a cost effective way for SMEs to comply. So instead of going and having to maybe get a consultant for 2 months or 3 months to help you, using the software should eliminate a lot of that cost. You might still need some additional help, but maybe it might be 20%, 80% software and 20% maybe getting some advice. So there's an awful lot of things that have been considered for SMEs. So yeah, so I don't believe it will stifle innovation. In fact, it could be a competitive advantage for SMEs in terms of if you don't get your products certified and others do, you might be at a disadvantage, particularly when you think about entities that have to manage their supply chain risk. They will be looking for certified products. So I think it's definitely maybe a competitive gain by actually complying.
Thank you, Patricia. Now on to the next question. Does the tool also address third-party components that are integrated into products? How should SMEs deal with components in their products more generally?
Yep, two really good questions, Mihai. So yes, the tool will address third-party components. So as you look to decompose the product inside the software, you'll be able to mark, components that come from third parties. The second part of the question is the interesting one. I think what the CRA will require is that component manufacturers, and they are referenced in the Act, will need to provide more information to their customers, so in order for them to be able to fully conform to the CRA. So what we expect is that, for example, components that contain software, that a software bill of materials would be given as part of the product documentation, and where there's hardware, that there would be either conformity assessment like CE marks for the individual components, or at least enough information that the SME manufacturer can understand what security controls are in the component, so that they can fulfill their CRA obligation. So yeah, the supply chain is a big part of this, and there's parts of the CRA that deal with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, how do you envision the application of AI in your project platform?
Yeah, it's a good follow on from the previous question. So one of the things we're working on is absorbing that documentation, hopefully in a machine readable format, but where it comes, for example, in PDF format, to use OCR and knowledge extraction capabilities from modern large language models, to actually understand what's in the product in a programmatic way, to help the SME in terms of that supply chain decomposition. So that's one use case that we have. The second use case we have is to actually generate the documentation that's required. So there's a couple of forms of that. The user documentation that's attached with the product. There's an annex in the CRA that describes what you need to include there. So we're hoping the software can generate at least a very, very good draft of that, which can be edited by the SME. And then also to generate documentation if you need to have an external conformity assessment. So you need to go to a conformity assessment body, that the software would generate all the documentation that you would need to go there, because that's quite a formal process. They require certain types of documentation and specific formats and standards.
Okay, the questions are flowing. Where R155 or ISO 21434 is not mandatory, would CRA be an alternative to ensure the security by design aspect?
Very much so. So that's an automotive security standard, and I think, as Patricia referenced, that standard covers certain aspects of, let's say, the vehicle. But let's say I have a mobile phone app that allows me to unlock the car or to do certain things with the car that's not actually maybe covered by that standard, and the CRA would cover that. So it would require that security by design and by default, which is a really important point, often missed. So the CRA says not only should it be secure by design, but all the security controls need to be turned on by default. So it's up to the user to turn them off, so that, when it comes out of the box or out of the wrapper or whatever, that it's secure. Yeah.
Now, considering that many of the artifacts, like documentation, code specification of our products, are confidential, what options do we have to perform the assessment safely? Is there an on-premise option?
I'll let Patricia answer that one. Or do you want me to answer it? Yeah. Sure, thank you. We've no plans for an on-premises option, because we're trying to sell this at scale for SMEs. It's something that we would consider. So if you wish to be an early adopter and help us with understanding what those things are and what our customers need from us, for sure. I think there's elements that do remain kind of on premises, so we don't need every artifact. So for example, if you have testing results, such as penetration testing results. We don't need the actual full technical detail of those test results. We just need to know, well, you found an issue and you remediated it. And that's actually an active discussion going on, not just with us, but with organizations like ENISA who need access to this information, but how can they do it safely, or at least reduce the risk where they're not aggregating large amounts of data about vulnerabilities in a single location. Yeah.
Thank you, Connor. Now the last question. Do you plan to extend the CRA-AI tool for other regulations in future, like AI Act, GDPR, and other regulations like that?
Yeah, I can take that one. At the moment, we don't. With the AI Act, I think, you know, what's happening with that, we'll wait and see. But there is, if you do the CRA, you are automatically going to comply with the security requirements of the AI Act. So as we're very focused on security, it's really the security elements we'd be more interested in. GDPR affects everything, so we need to make sure that, you know, from our perspective, from the CRA perspective, it's all underpinned by GDPR.